Hello and welcome to Chapter 5 in our business course. And in this chapter, we are going to be taking a brief look at business communication, creating and delivering messages that matter. As we go through this lecture, I will be explaining the importance of excellent business communication, describing the key elements of nonverbal communication, comparing, contrasting, and choosing effective communication channels, choosing the right words for effective communication, how to write effective business memos, letters, and emails, and finally, how to create and deliver successful verbal presentations. Now, in business communication, success depends largely on a person's ability to influence people. If you have great communication skills, you are going to significantly improve your chances to be successful. If you have poor communication skills, this can actually sabotage your success because people have a hard time following you, or maybe you rub them the wrong way. So it's very important to learn how to effectively communicate your messages. Now, in business communication, we want to be able to transmit or deliver a message that is relevant to the audience. There is nothing worse than sitting in a presentation or a meeting and the person that is presenting to you, you're not on the same page. So it ends up being a big waste of time for people. Now, when you're the one that's presenting, your communication must be dynamic, fluid, and two-way, which includes listening to your audience. You need to seek and understand feedback from the audience and respond appropriately. And being able to do all of those things will help you become a successful business communicator. Excellent communication skills include and basically communication is the transmission of information between a sender and a recipient. And two, you want to be able to minimize the noise that you are delivering. And noise is defined as the interference that's causing the message sent to be different from the message understood by the audience. So experts further define noise in terms of communication barriers, which arise in a number of forms. So some of these barriers, which are also obstacles, can be physical in terms of the way that you're presenting yourself. Your language, your body language. There may be cultural, perceptual, and organizational barriers. And this really comes into play when you're working with people that have different cultural backgrounds. And it's just really important to make sure that everybody is understanding each other, and that may require a little bit more work. Some nonverbal communication clues to be aware of. Nonverbal means that you don't use words. However, you have a goal to reinforce the meaning of your message. And this is done using eye contact, using your tone of voice, your facial expression. Are you smiling or are you frowning? And lastly, looking at your gestures and your posture. Are you sitting up straight or are you slouched and maybe texting and playing on your cell phone? So these are all nonverbal ways that We communicate both as a presenter and as audience members. We want to pay attention to all of those cues. Now, active listening is where the listener focuses his or her complete attention on the speaker. And you know that this is happening when there's eye contact, when you see either nodding of the head in agreement or maybe even shaking the head in disagreement. But you want to be able to watch for those people and you want to engage your audience so that they are active listening. So as you climb the corporate ladder, as your role of importance changes and gets to be more, those with greater influence tend to find that people listen to them more. So a first level manager, while they might be listened to, will not have the same influence as the CEO. When the CEO speaks, everybody listens. So sometimes our roles within an organization can influence how much people are listening and paying attention to what we're saying. So how do we become a better listener? Some do's are to use extra mental capacity to summarize what the speaker has said, take notes, notice any inconsistency between the speaker's words and the body language, use nonverbal communication to indicate interest, and use feedback and questions to indicate understanding. Some don'ts for better listening. Do not get distracted. Do not begin speaking the moment the person stops talking. Do not get overly comfortable. Do not use your phone. And do not interrupt or finish other people's sentences. Let them finish their thoughts. So communication channels, these are ways in which a message can be sent. And choosing the right communication channel is it's incredibly challenging. Communication channels are usually differentiated in terms of the richness they carry to their recipients. And depending on the audience, they can have a lot of information or maybe not as much information. It all depends on who your audience is. So how do we select the appropriate channel? So if we look at memos and reports, channel readiness, anyone can get a memo. And when is it used? When you use it when the content is uncontroversial, no one's going to get too upset. Same message is directed to several people, and when you're needing to communicate very detailed information, these are all very, very good ways to do that. Email is also a very low channel rich, and by channel rich, this is talking about the depth of how much of the communication you can see. Email is very low because you can't hear the tone of the person's voice. You can't see their body language. So you have to be very careful. It's a very flat way to communicate. And again, you want uncontroversial content, and it's a great way to send the same message out to many people. And texting is also very low, and in terms of, we're just seeing those words, but it's a great way to get a quick response, especially when it's on a pretty easy issue. Now, voicemail, it's good to leave messages that, again, are not heated or controversial, and there's a record of the message. and that's always nice to have. Now, telephone conversations, as far as channel richness, it starts to be moderate. You usually need a quick response. You can make the content personal, or you can make it controversial, especially if you're talking with someone that you're in a disagreement with. And a telephone conversation can also be spontaneous, dynamic. There can be dynamic dialogue with the recipient. And so you've got that bridge going. Video conferencing is very high. You can use that to reach multiple people with complex or high priority content. It can also be spontaneous, and the dynamic dialogue with the audience can be reached, or sometimes it can't be. If you're reaching a lot of people, you may not be able to direct your communication to one person too much, but you can have a nice question and answer session towards the end if it's appropriate. An in-person presentation, very high richness. You can use this to reach a large audience with an important message, and the beautiful part about this is that you can experience an immediate response from your audience, and you can start to read whether they're in agreement with you or not. And then, of course, we have a face-to-face meeting, which is the richest experience of all. This is where the message is personal. It can be emotional, complex. It can also be a high priority. And you can receive instant feedback from your audience. Now, when we're making a presentation in the business world, it's important to analyze our audience, to understand their expectations, their educational background, and the profession that they are in. We don't want to waste people's time, so be concise. Avoid using slang like, hey, yo. That's probably not going to work too well in a business environment. And you also want to avoid bias. And having a bias is a preconception about members of a particular group, especially in regards to gender, age, race, ethnicity, or nationality. And in fact, those areas are protected by law, so you need to be super, super careful and make sure that you're not communicating a bias that you don't want to. Also, part of picking the right words is using an active voice. An active voice facilitates direct, powerful, concise communication and is used when the subject of the sentence is doing the action. Using an active voice shows accountability, and that helps to create a deeper trust between the speaker and the audience. When you use a passive voice, you use it when the subject of the sentence is not doing what's been requested. So sentence construction is when the subject is acted upon. So I like that. A little bit of English lessons here. So how do we improve our writing skills? You want to structure your message according to the anticipated audience response. You want to use words that will get them hooked and interested. You want to use the right tone. Do you have a proposal that you're making that requires action? Building words that support your argument. You want to avoid grammatical errors. Some examples include, I think it's a really good product. Probably don't want to sound like a valley girl. You want to use block paragraphs, so be very concise, and you want to use headings and bulleted lists in appropriate places. So here's some examples of messages and responses. So the message is, please note the new computer password procedures. And one response was, great, we really needed this. A neutral response is, okay, no big deal. And a negative response is, oh, not another change. So all of these are examples of how we can communicate in a business environment and be positive, lukewarm, or just downright negative. And so choose your words carefully, both your verbal words and your written words. So 10 tips for excellent email. You need to consider both the primary and secondary readers. So this means that readers who are beyond who you're sending the message to. You want to keep your messages brief. Nobody wants an 8-page email. Proofread your message. Oh my goodness. I know I have been guilty of sending a message too quickly, and I did not communicate what I wanted to communicate. So don't fall into that trap. Use standard writing, no texting in the business communication, and avoid attachments if possible. And of course, you have to think about each particular situation. You want to avoid using email to communicate negative messages. And it's really important with the email because it is so heavily used in the business environment. You need to stay on top of it. You don't want to be the person that doesn't respond to email. Always respond promptly. Clarify any perceived offense. Create a compelling subject line. Let the reader know who or what you're talking about. And think before and after composing your message. And sometimes it's good to ask a trusted colleague to look at your message to make sure that you really are communicating what you want to communicate. Now, how to deliver successful verbal presentations. When you are opening your presentation, get the audience's attention. And you can do this by stating an interesting statistic. You can get the audience involved. You can tell a story or an anecdote. You can use a relevant simile or metaphor. You can ask engaging questions. And one that's not on here, you can tell a joke. I've been to many meetings that have started with fantastic jokes, and it really sets the tone of the meeting or presentation in a very positive way. Your body language. You want to use a clear, explicit structure. So by that means you want to be standing straight. You want to have your hands by your side. You don't want them to be in your pockets. You want to be dressed appropriately and convey a sense of confidence instead of, hunched over, I'm not too sure what they're going to think about this. Be proud of your presentation. There's a reason why you're speaking, and people want to hear what you have to say. And finally, at the end of your presentation, you need to summarize the key points. And you do that by relating key points back to the beginning of your presentation. It's also good for the speaker to verbally signal to the audience that he or she is about to conclude. And the speaker should support the conclusion with his or her body language as well. So all of these things help to make verbal presentations much stronger. Additionally, It is very important to anticipate questions and be able to answer them. And should you not have an answer, make a note and tell the audience that you will get that information to them. Have visual aids, make it interesting with pictures and graphics. Keep it brief. Offer examples with analysis and interpretation. Keep animation to a minimum. It's a nice tool, but you don't want to overdo it. And you want to keep the audience's attention focused on you and not on the slides. So, how to handle nervousness? Have a positive attitude. Stay calm and relaxed. Sip water to loosen your throat muscles and mitigate a shaking throat. Connect with a couple of members of your audience before your presentation. And focus on the audience's needs. If your meeting is at 11:30 a.m., right before lunch, you probably don't want to go over your time that's allotted. So what happens if you have a hostile audience? And that does happen on occasion. One, stay calm and professional. Allow time for any hostility to diffuse before answering. Refrain from seeking approval for your response. Agree to disagree if a situation warrants it. Sometimes you might be faced with an audience member that simply will not agree with you, and that's okay. Let it go. And you can also use your body language to convey that the conversation has ended. And you can do that by slightly turning your body away from the person and addressing a positive member in your audience. When you use humor, you want to make sure that the jokes are appropriate and relevant. So they should avoid any sexual connotation. You need to avoid jokes about genders, jokes regarding someone's racial background or ethnic background. Make sure that the jokes are very generic and are funny. Oh, practice, practice, practice. The best way to have a successful presentation is to practice ahead of time. If you haven't practiced, chances are you're probably going to fall on your face. You want to be vibrant. You want to have a compelling style that grabs and holds the attention of the audience. This helps to instill confidence in you as the deliverer, and that's what you want. You want your audience to trust you and to go with you and take whatever actions that you may need them to take. All right, 10 tips for dynamic delivery. Practice. Know your material, but don't memorize it word for word. Look at your audience members, at least half of the time. Change your voice, your facial expressions, and your body language. Nobody wants to hear the same tone all the time. That is very dull. Change it up. Use some notes. It's okay to use notes, but keep them tucked away a little bit out of sight. Stay to your allotted time. Slow down and listen to yourself. Don't apologize. There is no need to apologize unless there was something that was just obviously wrong. Just move on. Remember to use natural gestures. And did I say practice? So looking back, we've looked at the importance of excellent business communication. We've looked at some of the key elements of nonverbal communication. We've compared, contrasted, and chosen effective communication channels. That was that big graph. We've looked at the right words for communication. We've talked about some ways to write more effective business memos, letters, and emails. And finally, we've closed with creating and delivering successful verbal presentations. This concludes Chapter 5. There's a quiz, always a quiz, and there will be some other assignments in Buzz, so please check that out. And I do want to give you a heads up that we're getting close to midterm time, so make sure that you are going back through the videos and reviewing your notes for the proctored midterm that will be taken on campus. As usual, if you have any questions, please contact me, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.